The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in February 1882, informing Owen Harlow that his uncle's estate in northern Montana Territory had been settled, and he was now the owner of 300 acres of frozen wasteland he had never seen. Owen stood in the dusty telegraph office in Mineral Park, Arizona, reading the message 3 times while the operator watched him with curious eyes, wondering what news could make a man's face go so pale in the middle of a warm desert morning. "Bad news?" the operator finally asked. Owen folded the paper and shook his head. "Just unexpected. My uncle passed 6 months ago, didn't think he had anything to leave anyone." What the telegram didn't mention was that the land had cost the territory exactly 17 cents in back taxes, or that the property had been abandoned for nearly 3 years before his uncle's death. Owen learned these details from the lawyer's follow-up letter that arrived 2 weeks later, along with a crude map and a key to a cabin that supposedly still stood on the northern edge of the property. The lawyer's note was brief and businesslike, suggesting that Owen might get $50 for the whole parcel if he found the right buyer, though he doubted anyone would want land that stayed frozen 8 months out of 12. Owen had been working as a ranch hand outside Mineral Park for the past 4 years, saving every spare dollar with no clear purpose beyond the vague notion that someday he might have something of his own. At 28, he had strong hands, a quiet disposition, and a restlessness that had driven him west from Ohio when he was barely 20. The idea of land, even frozen land, sparked something in his chest that he recognized as dangerous hope. He gave his notice to the ranch foreman on the 1st of March, packed his belongings into 2 saddlebags and a bedroll, and began the long journey north. The trip took him nearly 6 weeks, traveling by horse, train, and stage, watching the landscape transform from red desert rock to green valleys to snow-covered peaks. By the time he reached the small trading post that served as the nearest settlement to his property, spring was supposedly arriving, though snow still covered the ground in thick drifts and the air bit at his face like a living thing. The trading post consisted of one large log building that served as store, saloon, and occasional hotel, run by a French-Canadian trapper named Marcel Duval, who looked at Owen's map and laughed. "The old Harlow place. You are family," his nephew. Never met him, truth be told. Marcel poured them both coffee from a pot that looked like it had been sitting on the stove since Christmas. "Your uncle, he was a strange man. Came here 15 years ago, built that cabin, trapped some, prospected some, mostly kept to himself. Last few years he got stranger. Used to come in here talking about voices in the woods, spirits that needed helping. We thought maybe the isolation got to him, you understand." Owen wrapped his hands around the tin cup, grateful for the warmth. "The cabin's still standing, last I saw, yes. But I have not been out that way since before the first snow. Could be anything now. The roof was not good even then." Marcel studied him with sharp eyes that had seen too many greenhorns come north with big dreams. "You plan to stay. That land is no good for ranching. Growing season may be 90 days if you are lucky. No gold, no silver, no copper. Your uncle, he never found nothing valuable out there." "Maybe I will just look it over and sell it," Marcel shrugged. "Maybe, but I think you would not travel so far just to look. You have that hungry expression." "I have seen it before. Men who need to prove something to themselves mostly. Just be careful. Spring here is tricky. The snow melts, the ground is mud, the creeks flood, and sometimes the winter leaves surprises." Owen set out the next morning with supplies, a rented pack mule, and Marcel's directions. The trail was barely visible under the melting snow, winding through pine forests and across open meadows where early flowers were just beginning to push through the white. The beauty of it caught him off guard. He had grown used to the stark magnificence of the Arizona desert, but this was different, softer somehow despite the cold, full of the promise of green things and growth. He found the cabin just before sunset on his second day of travel. It sat in a clearing surrounded by aspens, their white trunks luminous in the fading light. The structure was small, maybe 20 feet square, built from chinked logs with a stone chimney on the north side. The roof sagged alarmingly in the middle, and one of the two front windows had lost its glass, but it was still standing. What stopped Owen in his tracks was the smoke rising from the chimney. He dismounted slowly, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Squatters were common enough on abandoned property, and while he had no particular desire for confrontation, he needed to establish his ownership. He approached the cabin carefully, noting the snow around the door had been trampled and swept, that wood had been stacked neatly against the wall, that someone had been living here and maintaining the place. Before he could knock, the door opened. The woman who stood in the doorway was younger than he expected, maybe 24 or 25, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid and green eyes that assessed him with startling directness. She wore a simple dress covered by a man's coat that hung too large on her slender frame, and she held a rifle with the casual competence of someone who knew how to use it. "You must be Owen Harlow," she said. Her voice was clear and educated, with an Eastern accent he couldn't quite place. "We have been expecting you." She stepped back from the door, gesturing him inside. "Please come in. You must be frozen. We can explain everything." Every instinct told Owen this was a bad idea, but curiosity and the biting cold convinced him to follow her into the cabin. The interior was warmer than he expected, heat radiating from the fireplace where a good blaze crackled. The space was clean and organized, his uncle's sparse furniture supplemented with makeshift additions. 4 bedrolls were arranged along one wall. A pot of something that smelled like venison stew hung over the fire. 3 other people sat at the rough wooden table. A woman older than the first, perhaps 40, with dark blonde hair going gray at the temples and a tired, kind face. A boy of maybe 16 with sandy hair and fearful eyes. And a girl who couldn't have been more than 13, thin and pale, wrapped in a blanket despite the fire's warmth. "My name is Sarah Everhart," the woman with the rifle said, setting it carefully against the wall. "This is Mrs. Dorothy Brennan and her children, Thomas and Elizabeth. We have been living here since November." Owen removed his hat slowly, trying to process the situation. "This is my property, my uncle's property. We know. We found the deed papers in the desk. That's how we knew your name and that you might eventually come." Sarah moved to the fire, stirring the stew with a wooden spoon. "We didn't steal anything, Mr. Harlow. We needed shelter and this cabin was empty. We have been maintaining it, keeping it from falling down completely. I have some money saved. I can pay you rent for the months we have been here." "I don't want rent. I want to know what 4 people are doing in the middle of nowhere in the dead of winter." He looked at each of them in turn. "You're not trappers or prospectors. You're not homesteaders. So what are you?" The older woman, Dorothy, spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft and carried the weight of exhausted grief. "We are running, Mr. Harlow, or we were. Now we are just surviving until spring, hoping we can figure out what comes next." Sarah pulled out a chair, gesturing for Owen to sit. "We should start at the beginning. You deserve the full story if you are going to decide what to do with us." He sat, and they told him. Sarah had been a schoolteacher in a small town in Wyoming, respectable and proper until she witnessed the mayor's son assault one of her students. When she reported it, She learned quickly that justice was less important than reputation. The mayor's son claimed Sarah had made advances on him, that she was morally corrupt and had invented lies to cover her own shame. She lost her position, her reputation, and nearly her freedom when they threatened to charge her with slander. Dorothy Brennan had worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy family in Denver. When her employer died suddenly, his son decided the house needed new staff and new management. He also decided that the comely widow and her pretty young daughter might serve other purposes. When Dorothy refused his advances and protected Elizabeth from his intentions, he claimed she had been stealing from the household. The law in Denver was prepared to believe him. They met on a northbound stage, two women running from different kinds of persecution, realizing they might survive better together than apart. When the stage broke down 50 miles south of here in early November, they decided to strike out cross-country rather than wait for repair. They found the cabin just as the first serious snow began to fall. "We thought we would stay a week or two, just until the weather cleared," Sarah said. But the snow kept coming. Thomas went out hunting one day in December and fell through ice crossing a creek. By the time we got him back here, he was half frozen. Then Elizabeth developed a fever that lasted 3 weeks. We couldn't move them. We couldn't move at all, so we waited. "For spring," Owen said quietly. "For spring," Sarah confirmed. "We have been living on game, on supplies we found here, on the few things we brought with us. We knew eventually someone might come. We hoped whoever it was might be reasonable enough to at least let us leave peacefully." Elizabeth coughed, a wet rattling sound that made Dorothy's face tighten with worry. The girl was clearly still unwell, too thin, too pale. Thomas kept his eyes down, and Owen recognized the shame of a young man who felt he had failed to protect his family. "You have been here since November." Owen did the calculation in his head. 4 months in this cabin in brutal cold with limited supplies and a sick child. "We managed," Sarah said. There was steel in her voice, pride that wouldn't bend even in the face of desperation. "We are not thieves, Mr. Harlow, and we are not charity cases. We have kept this cabin standing. We repaired the chinking in the walls, replaced broken boards in the floor, kept the chimney clear. Without us, you would have arrived to find a collapsed roof and a ruined structure. We have earned our shelter." Owen looked around the cabin again, seeing it with new eyes. She was right. The place was in better condition than it had any right to be. The floor was solid under his feet. The fire drew well. Even the furniture had been repaired and reinforced. "The little girl," he said. "Elizabeth. She needs a doctor." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. "I know, but the nearest town is 2 days' ride, and I wasn't sure she could survive the journey. I have been giving her willow bark tea, keeping her warm. She is better than she was, but not well." Owen made his decision quickly, the way he always did when something felt right in his gut. "You can stay, all of you, at least until the girl is well enough to travel safely and the weather is truly clear." Sarah's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why would you do that?" "Because turning you out would make me the kind of man I don't want to be, and because you are right. You have been taking care of this place. That should count for something." He met her gaze steadily. "I have supplies on my mule outside, food, medicine, other necessities. Let me bring them in and stable the animals, then we can talk about longer-term arrangements." He stood to go outside, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "Mr. Harlow, thank you. We will not take advantage of your kindness." "I hope not, Miss Everhart, but I will be watching." He caught the smallest hint of a smile on her lips before he stepped back into the cold. The next weeks fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Owen took over the heavier work, repairing the roof properly, reinforcing the walls, building a proper lean-to for the animals. Thomas helped when Owen let him. eager to prove himself despite his lingering weakness from his near drowning. Dorothy managed the cooking and tended to Elizabeth, whose health slowly improved with the medicine Owen had brought and the better nutrition from his supplies. Sarah was harder to categorize. She worked alongside Owen on repairs when he needed an extra pair of hands, hunted with a skill that impressed him, and spent hours each day working with Thomas on his reading and mathematics. She never asked for help she didn't need, never complained about the conditions, and maintained a careful distance that Owen found both frustrating and intriguing. One evening, about 2 weeks after his arrival, he found her outside splitting wood in the fading light. She had abandoned the oversized coat for the work, and her shirt sleeves were rolled up despite the chill, her face flushed with effort. "You should let me do that," Owen said. "I have been doing it for 4 months. I think I can manage a few more logs." She drove the axe down with precision, splitting a round of pine cleanly in half. "Didn't say you couldn't. Said you should let me." She stopped, resting the axe head on the ground and looking at him with those direct green eyes. "Why? Because I am a woman. Because I have nothing else to do right now and you have been working since dawn. It is not about what you can or cannot do, Miss Everhart. It is about what makes sense." She studied him for a long moment, then handed him the axe. "All right, thank you." They worked in companionable silence for a while, Owen splitting wood while Sarah stacked it. The sun dropped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Snow still covered the ground, but there were patches of bare earth now, signs that spring was truly coming. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said finally. "Yes." "Why did you really come here? Marcel at the trading post said this land is worthless. No minerals, poor for ranching, too remote for farming. You could have sold it sight unseen." Owen set down the axe and leaned against the woodpile. "Honestly, I do not know. I have been drifting since I left Ohio 8 years ago. Working ranches, moving from town to town, never putting down roots. When I got that telegram saying I owned land, owned something, it felt like maybe a sign that I should stop drifting. Even if the land turned out to be worthless, at least it was mine. And now you find it occupied by 4 strangers with nowhere else to go. Now I find that maybe having land matters less than what you do with it, than who you share it with." He met her eyes. "You have not told me what you plan to do when spring really comes, when Elizabeth is well enough to travel." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking vulnerable in a way he had never seen. "I do not know. We cannot go back to where we came from. Dorothy and I have been talking about Oregon, maybe California. Somewhere we could start over where no one knows our stories. But it costs money to get that far, and we spent most of what we had just surviving. I might be able to find work as a seamstress or a laundress. Dorothy is an excellent cook. Thomas is young but strong. We will manage somehow. What about teaching? You said you were a teacher." Her laugh was bitter. "No school will hire me without references, and I cannot ask for references from the town that ran me out. That part of my life is over." Owen picked up the axe again, needing something to do with his hands. "What if you did not have to leave? What if there was work here? Here. There is nothing here but wilderness and a trading post. There is land, 300 acres of it. And a cabin that, with some more work, could be comfortable, even expanded." He was forming the idea as he spoke, feeling his way through it. "Marcel said the growing season is 90 days. That is enough for potatoes, cabbage, root vegetables, some hardy greens. The hunting is good. The forest is full of timber. It would not be easy, but it could be a life." Sarah stared at him. "Are you offering us your land?" "I am saying that I came here thinking I would be alone, and now I am not. I am saying that 4 people survived a Montana winter in this cabin through cooperation and stubbornness. I am saying that maybe we could turn this into something more permanent. A homestead. A real settlement. He paused, knowing his next words mattered. I am saying I would rather have neighbors I trust than empty land I own alone. You do not know us, Mr. Harlow. Not really. We have been here a few weeks together. That is not enough time to make this kind of decision. You are right, so we take our time. We get through the rest of the spring. We see how we work together. If it feels right by summer, we make it official. If not, I help you get to wherever you want to go with enough money to start over properly. Either way, you are not alone. He drove the axe into the chopping block and turned to face her fully. And Sarah, you can call me Owen. I think we are past formalities. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face from pretty to beautiful. All right, Owen, and you should know, what you are proposing is crazy. This land is frozen 8 months a year. We barely survived one winter. Building a homestead here would be brutally hard work with no guarantee of success. I know. We could fail, we could lose everything, or we could build something that lasts, something that is ours. He held out his hand. What do you say? Do we try? Sarah looked at his hand for a long moment, and Owen could see her thinking, weighing risks and possibilities. Then she reached out and clasped his hand firmly, her grip strong and sure. We try, she said, at least until summer. Then we decide. Spring arrived in earnest over the next weeks, the snow melting into rushing streams, the meadows exploding with wildflowers, the aspens leafing out in brilliant green. Elizabeth's health improved dramatically with the warmer weather and better food. Color returned to her cheeks, and she started helping her mother with tasks around the cabin. Thomas grew stronger too, and Owen began teaching him tracking and woodcraft, skills that would be essential if they were going to make a life here. Dorothy proved to be as capable as Sarah had claimed, turning their limited supplies into meals that actually tasted good, preserving what meat Owen and Thomas brought in, planning ahead for the next winter even though nothing was decided. She and Sarah had a friendship built on mutual respect and shared hardship, and Owen found himself included in their circle gradually, naturally, until he realized he felt more at home in this rough cabin with these near strangers than he had felt anywhere since leaving Ohio. But it was Sarah who occupied most of his thoughts. He found himself watching her when he should have been working, noticing the way she pushed loose strands of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way she laughed at Thomas's bad jokes, the fierce protectiveness she showed toward Elizabeth. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. She was capable and intelligent and determined, with a core of strength that attracted him more than simple beauty ever could. The problem was maintaining proper distance while living in close quarters. They had established sleeping arrangements that preserved propriety. Owen slept in the lean-to he had built for the animals, insulated and warmed by their body heat and a small stove he constructed. The women and Thomas kept the cabin. But they worked together all day, ate together, talked by the fire in the evenings. Proximity bred intimacy whether they intended it or not. One afternoon in late May, Owen and Sarah were working together to plant a garden plot he had cleared and fenced. The ground was still cold but workable, and they were putting in the hardiest vegetables: potatoes, turnips, carrots. Sarah had her hands deep in the soil, her face smudged with dirt, completely focused on spacing the seed potatoes correctly. "My mother had a garden," she said suddenly. "Back in Massachusetts. I used to help her plant every spring. I thought it was boring then. I would rather have been reading. You miss home." "I miss what home was before my parents died, before I had to make my own way." She sat back on her heels, looking at the mountains that surrounded them. "I became a teacher because it was respectable work for a woman alone. I was good at it. I loved the children. But I was always just surviving, just getting by. I never felt like I was building anything that would last. Owen placed another potato in the furrow they had created. And now I am planting potatoes in frozen ground in Montana territory, and somehow it feels more real than anything I did in that schoolhouse. She laughed softly. I must be losing my mind, or finding it. He moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. Sarah, I need to tell you something. All right. These past weeks, working with you, getting to know you, I have been feeling things that go beyond neighborly cooperation or simple friendship. He forced himself to maintain eye contact, to be honest even though honesty made him vulnerable. I know it is too soon. I know we said we would wait until summer to make decisions. But I need you to know that when I think about what I want to build here, you are part of that vision. Not just as someone who helps with the work, but as someone I want beside me. As a partner. As more than a partner, if you would ever consider it. Sarah's breath caught, and for a moment Owen thought he had miscalculated badly, that he had pushed too hard too fast. Then she reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and dirty from the soil. I have been feeling the same way, she admitted. And it terrifies me. The last time I trusted someone, the last time I thought I was building something secure, it fell apart and nearly destroyed me. I testified against a powerful man's son because it was the right thing to do, and it cost me everything. I am afraid to trust that feeling again. I cannot promise nothing will ever go wrong. I cannot promise this will be easy or that we will succeed. But I can promise I will never betray you. I can promise that if you stand beside me, I will stand beside you no matter what comes. He squeezed her hand gently. You are the strongest, bravest person I have ever met, Sarah Everhart. You survived things that would have broken most people. You protected Dorothy and her children through a winter that could have killed you all. You deserve someone who sees that strength and honors it. She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as he responded, his hand coming up to cup her face. They knelt in the dirt of their half-planted garden and kissed like the world was new, like they were the only two people in all the vast Montana wilderness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sarah rested her forehead against his. We should finish planting, she said, but she was smiling. We should, Owen agreed, making no move to let her go. Owen. Yes, thank you for coming here. Thank you for being the kind of man who saw 4 desperate people and chose kindness. Thank you for being here when I arrived. Thank you for making me realize that land means nothing without someone to share it with. They finished planting the garden as the sun moved across the sky, working side by side, and everything felt different now, charged with possibility and promise. That evening, they told Dorothy and the children about their feelings for each other, and Dorothy smiled with genuine warmth while Thomas tried to hide his grin, and Elizabeth clapped her hands in delight. Does this mean we can stay? Elizabeth asked, her young voice filled with hope. Does this mean this is home now? Owen looked at Sarah and she nodded. He turned to the girl and said, Yes, Elizabeth, this is home now, for all of us if that is what you want. It is what we want, Dorothy said firmly. We have been running for so long, it would be good to stop. To build instead of flee, if you truly mean it. I mean it. We will need to expand the cabin before next winter, build proper separate quarters for propriety's sake, but yes, this can work. This will work. They spent the rest of the evening planning, excited and optimistic, talking over each other with ideas for improvements, crops they could try, ways they could make the homestead more self-sufficient. It felt like a family, Owen thought. It felt like purpose. The summer proved that vision could become reality through hard work and determination. Owen and Thomas spent weeks felling trees and preparing lumber. then began construction on an addition to the cabin. They built 2 new rooms, one for Dorothy and Elizabeth, one for Sarah, with a common area in the middle that included a better kitchen and a large fireplace. Owen continued to sleep in the expanded lean-to that was now a proper small barn, though he and Sarah both knew that arrangement would change once they married. The garden flourished beyond their expectations. Sarah proved to have inherited her mother's skill with growing things, and the long summer days with their extended light gave the plants time to mature. They would have vegetables to eat fresh and to preserve for winter. Owen and Thomas hunted regularly, smoking and salting meat. Dorothy began experimenting with tanning hides, creating leather that could be used for clothing and boots and gear they would need in July. Owen made the trip to the trading post to purchase additional supplies and to file the proper homestead claim on his land. Marcel greeted him with surprise and approval. "You are still here, and you look good, my friend. Montana agrees with you. It does, better than I expected." Owen purchased nails, glass for windows, salt, sugar, flour, things they could not produce themselves. "I need to ask you about something legal. If I wanted to marry, what would be the process? Is there a judge nearby, a minister?" Marcel's eyebrows rose. "The school teacher, Miss Everhart." "Is it that obvious, my friend? You have the look of a man in love. It is very obvious." He grinned. "The circuit judge comes through in August, usually the 2nd week. He can perform marriages along with his other duties, or you could ride to Helena, find a minister there. The judge would be fine. Do I need to register anything beforehand? Just be ready to pay the fee and have witnesses. I would be honored to stand for you if you need someone." Owen shook his hand gratefully. "Thank you, Marcel, for everything. For the information when I first arrived, for the supplies, for being a friend. We look after each other out here. That is how we survive." Marcel's expression grew more serious. "I should tell you there have been men asking questions, about women traveling north last fall, about a widow with children and a younger woman. They came through about a month ago." Owen felt ice in his stomach. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. I know nothing about any women, but they were persistent. They said there were accusations, legal matters that needed resolving. They had descriptions that would match your friends." He met Owen's eyes. "I do not know what those women did or did not do, and I do not care. But you should know that someone is looking." "Did they say where they were going?" "North. They thought perhaps the women might have gone to Canada. I did not correct that assumption." Marcel paused. "Be careful, Owen. If these men are determined, they may come back." Owen rode home slowly, his mind working through the problem. He had known, abstractly, that Sarah and Dorothy's pasts might catch up to them eventually. But he had let himself believe that the remoteness of the homestead, the vastness of the territory, would be protection enough. Now he had to face the reality that their peace might be temporary. He told them that evening, watching Sarah's face go pale and Dorothy pull Elizabeth close protectively. Thomas looked frightened but angry, his hands clenching into fists. "We can run," Dorothy said quietly. "We have done it before." "No," Sarah's voice was firm. "I am done running. We have built something here. This is our home. I will not let them take it from us." "Then we fight," Owen said. "We prepare for the possibility they come here. We make sure everyone is safe. And we make sure that if they do show up, we are ready with our own version of events." Over the next weeks, they prepared. Owen taught Sarah and Dorothy to shoot properly, not just well enough to hunt, but well enough to defend themselves. They established signals and safe places in the woods where Elizabeth and Thomas could hide if needed. Owen wrote out careful documentation of everything they had done to improve the homestead, created a record of their lives here that would stand against any accusations. The judge arrived in mid-August. a gruff man named Harrison who traveled the circuit dispensing justice and government services in equal measure. Owen and Sarah stood before him in the trading post with Marcel, Dorothy, Thomas, and Elizabeth as witnesses, and pledged themselves to each other in words that were simple and legal and binding. Do you, Owen Harlow, take this woman Sarah Everhart to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Sarah Everhart, take this man Owen Harlow to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Then, by the authority vested in me by Montana territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Owen kissed Sarah in front of their small gathering, and it felt like sealing a promise, like making permanent something that had been provisional. Dorothy cried happy tears. Elizabeth threw handfuls of wildflowers they had picked that morning. Thomas shook Owen's hand solemnly, man to man, and said, "Thank you for taking care of them, for taking care of all of us." They celebrated that night at the homestead with a feast Dorothy had been planning for weeks, eating venison roasted with wild herbs, fresh bread, early vegetables from the garden, and a cake made precious with the last of their sugar. They told stories and sang songs, and for a few hours the threat of men with questions seemed distant and unimportant. When everyone else had gone to bed, Owen and Sarah sat together outside the cabin, looking at the stars that filled the sky with impossible brightness. "Are you afraid?" Owen asked. "Of what might be coming?" "Yes," Sarah admitted, "but I am more afraid of losing this, of losing you." She leaned against his shoulder. "When I testified against that boy, I thought I was doing the right thing. I still believe I was. But it taught me that doing right does not always protect you, that the truth matters less than power sometimes. Then we make sure we have truth and power both. We have legal claim to this land. We have a homestead that proves we are building a legitimate life. We have each other." He wrapped his arm around her. "And if they come, we stand together, all of us." "Together," Sarah agreed. "I like the sound of that." They went inside eventually, to the room that was now theirs, and consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, and the knowledge that they had chosen each other freely, that this was not convenience or desperation but genuine love. Afterward, Sarah fell asleep in Owen's arms, and he lay awake listening to her breathe, promising himself that he would protect her, no matter what it took. The men came on a cold morning in early September, just as the aspens were beginning to turn gold. There were 3 of them, dressed in city clothes that looked ridiculous in the wilderness, riding horses they clearly did not know how to handle well. Owen was working on the roof of the barn when he spotted them, and he climbed down quickly, calling out a warning. Sarah and Dorothy heard and moved into the positions they had practiced. Dorothy took the children into the cabin, armed and ready to defend if necessary. Sarah stood beside Owen as the riders approached, her rifle held casually but ready, her face composed and calm. The lead rider was a man in his 50s, well-fed and prosperous-looking, with hard eyes and a badge that said Special Deputy pinned to his coat. The other 2 were younger, hired muscle more than legitimate law enforcement. "I am looking for a woman named Sarah Everhart," the lead man said without preamble. "I have reason to believe she may be in this area." "What business do you have with her?" Owen asked. "Legal business. There are serious accusations against her. Slander, defamation of character, corrupting the morals of minors. She needs to return to Wyoming to face these charges." Sarah stepped forward, her head high. "I am Sarah Everhart, or I was. My name is Sarah Harlow now. This is my husband, Owen. This is our homestead." The man's eyes narrowed. "Married? Convenient. Doesn't change the facts, Mrs. Harlow. You made false accusations against a respected citizen's son. You damaged his reputation and standing in the community. The family is prepared to pursue this to the fullest extent of the law." "I made truthful accusations," Sarah said, her voice steady. "I witnessed James Sullivan assault a 12-year-old student in my classroom. I reported it to the authorities as I was legally and morally obligated to do. The fact that his father is the mayor does not change what I saw. That is for a court to decide. You need to come back with us." Owen moved to stand slightly in front of Sarah. "My wife is not going anywhere. If there are legitimate legal proceedings, you can file them through proper territorial channels. But you are on my property without invitation, making threats without legitimate authority. That badge says Special Deputy, not U.S. Marshal. You have no jurisdiction here." The man's face reddened. "The boy's family has suffered enormous damage to their reputation. They have a right to redress." "The boy's family should have raised their son to not assault children," Sarah said coldly. "I have nothing more to say to you. Leave our property." One of the younger men moved his hand toward his gun, and instantly Owen had his own revolver drawn and aimed. "I would not do that. My wife and I are both very good shots, and we have friends inside who are equally capable. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Leave now, and this ends peacefully." For a tense moment, the outcome balanced on a knife's edge. Then the lead man raised his hand, stopping his companion from drawing. "This is not over. The Sullivan family has resources. They will pursue this." "Let them pursue it through legal channels," Owen said. "But they will find that my wife has established a new life with a husband who will defend her rights on legally claimed land in Montana territory. She has broken no laws. She committed no crimes. She told the truth, and if the Sullivan family does not like that truth, perhaps they should look to their own failures rather than persecuting a woman who dared to speak up." The men turned their horses and rode away, but the lead man called back, "You have not heard the last of this." When they were out of sight, Sarah let out a shaky breath and lowered her rifle. "Do you think they will come back? Maybe, but we did everything right. You are legally married to me, legally homesteading, and their accusations are baseless. They were hoping to intimidate you into just giving up and going back with them." He pulled her into his arms. "You were incredibly brave. I was terrified. Brave is not the same as unafraid. Brave is being terrified and standing your ground anyway." Dorothy emerged from the cabin with Thomas and Elizabeth, relief evident on her face. "They are gone. For now." Owen looked at all of them, this family they had built from desperate circumstances and determination. "But we need to be prepared for the possibility they come back or send others. I am going to ride to the territorial capital, file proper documentation of everything, make sure our legal position is as strong as possible." "I will go with you," Thomas said. "I am old enough." "You might need someone watching your back." Owen considered the boy, who was nearly a man now, who had grown strong and capable over the summer months. "All right. We will leave tomorrow, travel fast, and be back within 2 weeks." They made the journey to Helena in 10 days, pushing hard. Owen filed marriage certificates, homestead claims, affidavits detailing Sarah's version of events in Wyoming. He spoke to a territorial attorney who agreed that the accusations against Sarah were unlikely to hold up in any legitimate court, especially given that she was now a married woman with legal residence elsewhere, and that no actual charges had been filed in Wyoming, only threats and accusations. "The problem," the attorney said, "is that harassment and threats do not require legal justification. If this family has money and influence, they can make life difficult even if they cannot win in court. Your best protection is exactly what you are doing. Establish your legitimacy, document everything, and make it more trouble than it is worth for them to pursue this." Owen paid the man his fee and headed back to the homestead with Thomas, hoping that distance and difficulty would discourage the Sullivans from further action. But he also purchased additional ammunition and another rifle, just in case hope proved insufficient. They returned to find that Sarah and Dorothy had not been idle. The women had harvested the garden, preserved vegetables in the root cellar they had dug, smoked the last of the summer meat. The homestead looked established, permanent, a place where people clearly lived and worked and belonged. Sarah met Owen at the edge of the clearing, and the relief on her face when she saw him was worth every hard mile of the journey. "You are back. I am back. And we did everything we could to protect you legally. The rest is up to whether the Sullivan family decides you are worth the trouble of pursuing across territorial lines." She kissed him hard, fierce and claiming, "I missed you. I missed you too, every mile." The autumn passed peacefully, and they began to hope that perhaps the confrontation had been the end of it. The aspen leaves turned gold and fell. The nights grew longer and colder. The first snows dusted the mountains. They spent the shortening days making final preparations for winter, reinforcing the buildings, stocking the root cellar, ensuring they had enough firewood to last through the frozen months. In late October, Dorothy approached Owen and Sarah with hesitation written all over her face. "I need to talk to you both about something." They sat together in the main room, Thomas and Elizabeth already in bed, the fire crackling softly. Dorothy twisted her hands in her lap, clearly nervous. "Marcel came by while you were in Helena," she said. "He brought supplies, but he also brought something else, a letter for me." Sarah reached out and took her friend's hand. "From Denver, from my sister. I wrote to her months ago when we first arrived here just to let her know I was alive and safe. I did not expect a reply. I did not even know if the letter would reach her." Dorothy pulled a worn envelope from her pocket. "She says the man who accused me of theft has died, thrown from a horse. His widow found evidence that he had been embezzling from his own family's accounts and was planning to blame it on the staff. My name has been cleared. My sister says I can come home, that there are positions available, that Elizabeth and Thomas could have real schooling again." The silence stretched out, heavy with implications. Finally, Owen spoke. "What do you want to do?" "I do not know. This has been home. You have all been family. But I also think about Elizabeth growing up here, miles from other children, from proper education, from opportunities. I think about Thomas, who is bright and capable and deserves a chance to learn a trade or go to school. I think about myself and whether I am staying because I want to or because I am afraid to leave." Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You have to do what is best for you and your children. We would never hold you here out of obligation. But you are my family too. You saved us. Gave us shelter when we had nothing. And you helped save us right back," Sarah said firmly. "We survived that winter together. We built this place together. That does not change whether you are here or in Denver. You will always be part of this." Dorothy wiped her eyes. "Could we stay through the winter? I do not want to travel in the snow with the children, and I want to be sure we are leaving you prepared to manage without us. Then in the spring, if the offer still stands, we could go to Denver, try to build a life there." "Of course," Owen said. "And you will go with money and supplies and everything you need to start over properly. You have earned that 10 times over." They spent the winter months preparing for the separation, trying to make the most of the time they had together. Owen and Thomas built a proper sled so that traveling in the snow would be easier when the time came. Sarah spent hours with Elizabeth, teaching her everything she could, giving her books and slates and materials for learning. Dorothy and Sarah talked long into the nights, sharing memories and making plans and promising to write. When spring came in 1883, It was with the bittersweet knowledge that change was coming. The snow melted, the trails cleared, and in late April they packed the wagon Owen had purchased during a trip to the trading post. Dorothy and her children would travel to Helena, then take the stage to Denver, carrying letters of reference from Owen and Sarah, money they had earned through their work, and supplies to see them through. The morning of departure was hard for everyone. Elizabeth clung to Sarah, crying. Thomas shook Owen's hand with a man's grip but a boy's tears on his face. Dorothy hugged them both fiercely. "You gave us back our lives," she said. "You gave us hope when we had none. I will never forget that." "You gave us just as much," Sarah replied. "You were the first family I had after losing everything. You will always be my family." They watched the wagon roll away until it disappeared into the trees, and then Sarah turned into Owen's arms and wept. He held her, understanding that grief and happiness could coexist, that you could want the best for someone and still mourn their leaving. "It is just us now," she said finally. "Just us," Owen agreed. "Is that enough?" She pulled back and looked at him, her green eyes still wet but clear. "It is more than enough. It is everything." They threw themselves into the work of the homestead with renewed energy, two people building a life with their own hands and hearts. They expanded the garden, adding new crops and experimenting with different varieties. Owen built a proper smokehouse and improved the barn. Sarah started keeping chickens, trading for hens at the trading post and building a coop that protected them from predators. In June, Sarah realized she was pregnant. She told Owen one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of rose and gold. "I am fairly certain," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I should have had my courses 3 weeks ago, and I am never late. And I have been feeling sick in the mornings." Owen felt his heart expand with a joy so intense it was almost painful. "A baby, our baby. Are you happy? I know we have not talked about children. I know this makes everything more complicated." He pulled her into his lap, cradling her carefully. "I am happier than I knew I could be. You are giving me a family, Sarah. A real family, something I never thought I would have." "We are giving each other a family," she corrected. "This baby is ours. Everything we have built here is ours, together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Sarah remained strong and healthy, continuing to work in the garden and around the homestead even as her belly swelled. Owen became increasingly protective, trying to take on more of the heavy work, but Sarah refused to be treated as fragile. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him. "Most of them while working much harder than I am. I am fine, Owen. I promise I will tell you if I am not." In September, they received an unexpected visitor. A young woman arrived at the homestead on a sturdy horse, wearing practical traveling clothes and carrying a medical bag. She introduced herself as Dr. Catherine Morrison, one of the few female physicians in Montana Territory, making her rounds to remote homesteads. "I heard in town that there was a pregnant woman out here," she said. "Thought I would check in, make sure everything is progressing well." Sarah submitted to the examination, and Dr. Morrison pronounced everything healthy and normal. "Your baby should arrive sometime in late January or early February, based on what you have told me. I will try to come back around that time, but winter travel is unpredictable." "Do you have experience with childbirth?" "None," Sarah admitted. "My mother died before I was old enough to help with such things. I have books, but that is not the same as practical knowledge." Dr. Morrison spent 3 days at the homestead, teaching Sarah and Owen everything they might need to know. How to recognize the stages of labor, what supplies to have ready, what complications to watch for, when to be concerned, and when to trust that nature would take its course. She left them with additional medical supplies and instructions, promising to return if she could, but making sure they were prepared to manage on their own if necessary. The autumn was glorious, warm and long, the garden producing abundantly. They preserved everything they could, knowing they would need the food not just for themselves but for a baby who would be nursing and needing Sarah's strength. Owen hunted, putting away meat for the winter. They stacked firewood until the shed could hold no more, then stacked more. In November, they received a letter from Dorothy. She and the children had arrived safely in Denver, found work and housing, and were settling into a new life. Elizabeth was attending school and thriving. Thomas had apprenticed with a carpenter and was learning a trade. Dorothy herself had found work as a head housekeeper for a respectable family, with good wages and fair treatment. "We miss you both terribly," she wrote, "but we are happy. We are building a good life here, and it is because of what we learned with you, the strength we found during that winter and the months after. You gave us the foundation. Now we are building on it. Thank you, forever and always." Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it in the small box where she kept precious things. "I am glad they are doing well. So am I. And I am glad we are here, doing well ourselves." Owen rested his hand on her rounded belly, feeling the baby kick against his palm. Building our own foundation. Winter came early that year, snow falling in thick flurries by mid-November. But they were prepared, the cabin tight and warm, the root cellar and smokehouse full, the animals sheltered and fed. They settled into the quiet rhythm of winter days, working on small projects, reading by the fire, talking about the future and the child who would join them soon. Sarah's time came on a cold February night, waking them both with the first sharp pains of labor. Owen lit lamps and stoked the fire, trying to remember everything Dr. Morrison had taught them. Sarah walked and breathed and labored through the long hours of the night, Owen beside her, supporting her, encouraging her, feeling more helpless and terrified than he had ever felt in his life. "You are doing so well," he kept saying. "You are so strong, almost there." "Easy for you to say," Sarah gasped between contractions, but she was smiling slightly. "You are not the one pushing a human being out of your body." Dawn was breaking when their son finally arrived, sliding into Owen's waiting hands, small and perfect and screaming with healthy lungs. Owen wrapped him in clean cloths and placed him on Sarah's chest, his eyes burning with tears he did not try to hide. "He is beautiful," Sarah whispered, exhausted and radiant. "He is perfect, just like his mother." Owen kissed her forehead gently. "You did it. You were incredible." They named him Oliver, after Owen's father, with the middle name Thomas for the boy who had been like a brother during their first year on the homestead. Oliver Harlow came into the world in a cabin in the Montana wilderness, welcomed by parents who had built their lives from frozen ground and desperate hope, who had chosen each other freely and loved fiercely. The winter months with a newborn were challenging, but also filled with a sweetness Owen had never imagined. He woke in the night to help Sarah with feedings, changed diapers, walked the floor with Oliver when he was fussy. Sarah recovered quickly from the birth, her strength returning as she settled into motherhood. They were tired and busy and happier than either had imagined possible. Spring came again, their second spring on the homestead, and with it the realization that they had truly built something lasting. The garden was planted larger than before. The chickens were laying. Owen began construction on a proper house, larger and more permanent than the cabin, something that would accommodate a growing family. In April, they received another letter, this one from Wyoming. It was from the territorial attorney Owen had consulted in Helena, forwarding information he thought they should know. The Sullivan family had attempted to file charges against Sarah, but had been blocked by the fact that no actual crime could be demonstrated. Furthermore, an investigation into James Sullivan's behavior had turned up additional accusations from other families, other girls he had victimized. The truth Sarah had spoken was finally being heard, and James Sullivan was facing real consequences. "It does not undo what they put you through," Owen said as Sarah read the letter with shaking hands. "But at least the truth is out. At least other girls are being protected. I testified because it was right, not because I thought I would be vindicated," Sarah said. "But it does feel good to know that standing my ground mattered. That speaking up made a difference, even if it took time." That summer, they had their first visitors beyond the occasional trader or trapper. A young couple looking for land of their own rode out to see the homestead, having heard in town that Owen Harlow had made a success of frozen ground. Owen showed them around, pointed them to unclaimed land about 5 miles south, helped them file their claim at the land office. "Are you trying to build a town?" Sarah asked, amused when he came home. "Maybe. Or at least a community. So Oliver grows up with other children around, so we have neighbors we can count on the way we counted on Dorothy and Thomas and Elizabeth." He pulled her close, careful of the baby sleeping in her arms. "So we keep building something that lasts." More families came over the next years. The territory was opening up, railroads spreading, bringing settlers an opportunity. What had been empty wilderness when Owen first arrived slowly transformed into a small settlement. They built a school, and Sarah taught again, this time in a one-room building Owen helped construct, teaching the children of homesteaders and ranchers. A church went up, and a store and a blacksmith shop. Through it all, Owen and Sarah's homestead remained the center of their world. They added 2 more children to their family, a daughter named Sophia in 1885 and another son, Oscar, in 1887. The house Owen had started building was completed and expanded, a solid 2-story structure that could accommodate their growing family and the occasional visitors who still needed shelter or help. They prospered in the way of people who measured wealth not in money but in community and family, and the satisfaction of work well done. The garden fed them and provided surplus to trade. The chickens multiplied into a large flock. Owen added cattle and horses, building the homestead into a working ranch that provided a solid living. Dorothy and her children came to visit in the summer of 1888, traveling from Denver for a reunion that was loud and joyful and emotional. Elizabeth was 16 now, beautiful and confident, planning to attend normal school to become a teacher like Sarah. Thomas was 20, working as a carpenter, engaged to be married. Dorothy herself looked younger than she had in years, the lines of worry smoothed from her face. "Look at what you have built," she said, standing with Sarah and looking out at the homestead. "Look at this life." "Look at what you have built too," Sarah replied. "You took your second chance and made something beautiful with it. We all did. That is what we learned, I think. That no matter how bad things get, no matter how frozen the ground seems, spring always comes if you are strong enough to wait for it." They spent 2 weeks together, the children playing, the adults talking late into the nights, sharing stories and memories. When Dorothy and her family left, it was with promises to visit again, to stay connected, to remember where they had all come from and what they had survived together. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges but also stability and joy. The settlement grew into a small town, eventually named Harlow Springs in recognition of Owen's role in founding it. Sarah taught 3 generations of children in her schoolhouse. Owen served on the town council, helped build roads and bridges, became the kind of community leader people trusted. Their children grew strong and capable. Oliver showed his father's quiet strength and his mother's fierce determination. Sophia was bright and quick, reading voraciously, asking questions about everything. Oscar was the adventurous one, always exploring, always looking for the next challenge. In 1895, when Oliver was 12, he asked his parents how they met. They sat on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the mountains in familiar shades of orange and purple, and told him the story. About frozen land bought for pennies, about 4 souls waiting in a cabin for spring, about choosing to build rather than run, about love found in the most unlikely circumstances. "So you bought land you had never seen and found Mom living in it?" Oliver asked, trying to understand. "I found much more than that," Owen said, reaching for Sarah's hand. "I found a family, I found a purpose, I found the life I was meant to live. And I found someone who saw me at my worst, my most desperate, and chose to trust me anyway," Sarah added. "Someone who gave me back my belief in goodness and kindness and the possibility of building something that lasts." "That is a good story," Oliver decided. "Better than the ones in books." "It is a true story," Sarah said, "and the best part is it is still happening. Every day we are still building, still growing, still writing the next chapter." They watched the sun set together, 3 generations of Harlows now, with a 4th on the way as Sophia was expecting her first child. The homestead that had begun as frozen ground and a desperate gamble had become a legacy, a place where family gathered, where community formed, where love and determination had proven stronger than hardship and fear. Owen thought about that telegram he had received so many years ago in a dusty Arizona telegraph office, about his decision to travel north to see what he had inherited. He thought about finding Sarah standing in the cabin doorway with a rifle and determination in her eyes. He thought about every choice that had led to this moment, sitting on his porch with his wife's hand in his children around him, his life rich with meaning and purpose. "No regrets?" Sarah asked softly, reading his mind the way she so often did. "Not a single one. You. Only that it took so long to find you. But maybe we both needed to go through what we did to be ready for this, to be ready for each other. Maybe. Or maybe we were just lucky enough to both be stubborn enough to survive until we found each other." She laughed, the sound as bright and beautiful as it had been 20 years ago when they first fell in love. Stubborn is definitely the right word. As the stars came out and the children went inside to prepare for bed, Owen and Sarah stayed on the porch, comfortable in the silence of long companionship, grateful for the life they had built from frozen ground and desperate hope. They had taken pennies' worth of land and made it priceless. They had found each other when both were lost. They had built a family, a community, a legacy that would outlast them both. The frontier was changing, becoming more civilized, more settled. But here on their homestead, in their home, the spirit of those early days remained. The determination to build rather than give up. The courage to trust when trust seemed impossible. The belief that spring always came, no matter how long or hard the winter. Years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of seasons passing. The turn of the century brought new technologies and changes to Montana. Railroads connected formerly remote settlements. Automobiles began appearing on improved roads, though Owen and Sarah remained loyal to their horses. The wild frontier of their youth became the settled society of their middle age, but some things remained constant. Their love deepened with time rather than fading. They still held hands walking through the garden Sarah tended with care. They still talked late into the night about dreams and fears and hopes. They still chose each other, every single day, with the same commitment they had made in that trading post so many years before. Oliver grew into a fine man. taking over much of the ranch work as Owen's joints began to stiffen with age. He married a teacher from Helena in 1900, and they built a house on the southern portion of the homestead, keeping the family land together. Sophia married a merchant and moved to Billings but visited often with her growing family. Oscar joined the Territorial Rangers, protecting the wilderness he had loved as a child, though he always came home to the homestead for important occasions. Dorothy passed away peacefully in Denver in 1903, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Sarah and Owen made the long journey for the funeral, standing with Thomas and Elizabeth as they said goodbye to the woman who had been friend and family and fellow survivor. After the service, the four of them sat together sharing memories. "She never stopped talking about that first winter," Elizabeth said. "About how close we came to not making it and how you both saved us." "We saved each other," Sarah corrected gently. "That is what she understood. That survival is not about individual strength, but about choosing to help each other, to build together rather than face the darkness alone." Thomas, now a successful builder with his own company, nodded. "She made me promise to help people the way you helped us. To always remember what it feels like to be desperate and to make sure I never turned away someone who needed a chance." "That is a good legacy," Owen said. "The best kind, really." They returned to Montana carrying Dorothy's memory with them, adding it to the foundation of everything they had built. Sarah planted a tree in the garden, an aspen sapling that would grow tall and strong, its white bark shining like hope even in the darkest seasons. As Sarah and Owen moved into their 60s, they began to step back from the daily work of the ranch, trusting Oliver and his family to manage operations while they focused on the things that brought them joy. Sarah still taught, though only part-time now, working with the youngest children who were just learning their letters. Owen served as an informal advisor to the town, the kind of respected elder whose opinion carried weight because it was earned through decades of fair dealing and honest work. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1913, the town threw them a celebration. It seemed like everyone in Harlow Springs and the surrounding area came to honor them, to share stories about how Owen and Sarah had helped them, taught them, built something that benefited the whole community. "I do not feel like we did anything special," Sarah whispered to Owen as yet another family came to thank them. "We just lived our lives." "That is exactly what was special," Owen replied. "We lived our lives with purpose and integrity. We chose kindness when we could have chosen bitterness. We built when we could have run. That matters, Sarah. It always mattered." The party lasted long into the night, with music and dancing and food contributed by dozens of families. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, along with friends spanning generations. Thomas and Elizabeth came from Denver, bringing their own families. Marcel, ancient now but still sharp-eyed, traveled from the trading post he had retired from years ago. "I knew it that first day," Marcel told anyone who would listen. "When young Owen came looking for his frozen land, I knew he was special. And when he came back talking about the schoolteacher, I knew they would build something that lasted. Look at this. This whole town, all these people, all because two people chose to trust each other." As the celebration wound down and guests began departing, Sarah and Owen found themselves alone on the porch of their home, the same porch where they had spent countless evenings over the decades. The night was clear and cold, stars blazing overhead, the familiar silhouette of mountains dark against the sky. 30 years, Sarah said wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you rode up to that cabin and found us squatting in your inheritance." "Best thing I ever inherited," Owen said, pulling her close. "Four souls waiting for spring. I thought I was coming here to claim land. Instead, I found everything that mattered. We found it together. That is the important part. Not that you rescued me or I rescued you, but that we chose to face everything side by side. They stood together in the cold and the starlight, two people who had built a life from frozen ground, who had transformed pennies' worth of land into a legacy worth more than money could measure. They had faced threats and challenges, survived winters both literal and metaphorical, raised children, and helped build a community. They had kept the promises they made to each other 3 decades before, and those promises had become the foundation everything else was built upon. "Do you think the children understand?" Sarah asked. "What we built here, what it means?" "I think they do, maybe not in words, but in the way they live their lives. Oliver works this land with the same commitment we did. Sophia teaches her children the same values we taught her. Oscar protects the wilderness because we taught him to respect it. They understand in their bones, even if they could not articulate it. And their children, our grandchildren, we are telling them the stories. We are showing them through how we live. That is all we can do. Plant the seeds and trust that spring will come for them too." Sarah rested her head against Owen's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his presence that had been her constant companion through so many years. "I love you, Owen Harlow. I have loved you since the day you could have turned us away and chose kindness instead. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Sarah Harlow. You made me believe in goodness again when I thought the world was just about surviving. You taught me that building something that lasts is worth any hardship. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up every day grateful." They kissed there in the starlight, two people in their 60s with lines on their faces and silver in their hair, and the kiss held all the tenderness and passion of their 3 decades together. It held the memory of their first kiss in a half-planted garden, of stolen moments during their early days, of celebrations and sorrows shared. It held the promise that whatever time remained to them, they would face it together, still building, still growing, still choosing each other every single day. The years continued their steady march. Montana achieved statehood, bringing new formalities and structures, but not changing the essential character of the place. Harlow Springs grew into a proper town with paved streets and electricity, though the core values of community and mutual support that Owen and Sarah had helped establish remained strong. They celebrated their 40th anniversary more quietly than their 30th, with just family gathering for a dinner that stretched late into the evening. 12 grandchildren now, ranging from infants to young adults, filled the house with noise and laughter. Oliver's oldest son was preparing to take over the ranch, the 3rd generation of Harlows to work the land. Sophia's daughter wanted to be a doctor, inspired by stories of Dr. Morrison, who had helped bring her father into the world. Oscar's twins were wild and adventurous, reminding Sarah and Owen of their own younger selves. As the family gathered for a photograph, 4 generations standing together on the porch of the house Owen had built with his own hands, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. This was what they had built, not just a homestead or a town, but a family that would carry their values forward, that understood the importance of choosing kindness, of working hard, of standing together through whatever challenges came. Owen's health began to decline in 1925. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for nearly 70 years. He moved more slowly, tired more easily, spent more time sitting on the porch watching the mountains than working in the fields. Sarah stayed close, reading to him, talking about their life together, making sure he was comfortable and surrounded by love. One evening in late spring, as the aspens leafed out in that brilliant green that meant winter was truly over. Owen took Sarah's hand and said, "I want you to know something. I am listening. When I die, and I know that is coming sooner rather than later, I want you to know that I have no regrets. None. Every choice I made that led me to you was right. Every hard day we survived together was worth it. Every moment of this life we built was exactly what I was meant to do." His eyes were bright with tears, but also with absolute certainty. "You gave me everything that mattered, Sarah. You were my spring after years of winter. You were my home when I did not know I was looking for one. You were my love, my partner, my best friend. Thank you for saying yes to all of it." Sarah was crying now, holding his hand in both of hers. "Thank you for seeing me when I was desperate and scared and choosing to trust anyway. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for 37 years of choosing me every single day. 43 years, actually. Since the day I first saw you in that cabin doorway. I was choosing you even then, even if I did not know it yet." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in those familiar shades of orange and purple and rose, and Sarah memorized every detail of this moment. The feel of Owen's hand in hers, the sound of his breathing, the warmth of his presence beside her. The absolute rightness of being exactly here, exactly now, with exactly this person. Owen passed away peacefully 3 weeks later in his sleep, with Sarah lying beside him. He simply didn't wake up one morning, his heart finally giving out after 71 years of steady beating. The grief was profound, a physical ache in Sarah's chest, but it was tempered by gratitude for every year they had together, every moment they had built and shared and treasured. The funeral drew people from all over Montana. Former students Sarah had taught, families that had homesteaded because Owen helped them, town officials who had served with him, friends spanning decades. Thomas and Elizabeth came from Denver with their families. People told stories about Owen's fairness, his generosity, his quiet strength that had helped build not just a homestead but a community. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the homestead, with a simple stone that said Owen Harlow, 1854–1925. He built a life worth living. Sarah stood at the graveside with her children and grandchildren surrounding her, and she thought about the young cowboy who had ridden up to a cabin 43 years ago and chosen kindness over convenience, love over loneliness, building over running. "He would have liked this spot," Oliver said quietly. "He could see the whole homestead from here, see everything he built." "Everything we built together," Sarah corrected. "That was always the important part. We did it together." She lived another 15 years, staying active and engaged with the community until her own health began to fail. She continued teaching until she was 78, insisting that she was perfectly capable even as her students had to help her with stairs. She spent time with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about the early days, about survival and love, and choosing to build rather than give up. In her final days, lying in the bedroom she had shared with Owen for so many years, Sarah found herself thinking about that first winter, about huddling in the cabin with Dorothy and Thomas and Elizabeth, wondering if they would survive until spring, about Owen riding up with supplies and hope and a choice to trust strangers, about planting potatoes in frozen ground and believing they would grow. "It all grew," she whispered to Sophia, who was sitting beside her bed. "Everything we planted, all of it grew. The potatoes and the children and the love and the community, all of it. Because of you and Dad," Sophia said, holding her mother's hand. "Because you believed in spring even in the middle of winter. Because we believed in each other. That was the secret. Not the land or the luck or anything else. Just two people choosing to believe in each other and to work together towards something better. Sarah Harlow passed away on a warm June morning in 1940, with her children around her and sunlight streaming through the windows. She was 82 years old and had lived to see her great-great-grandchildren, to witness the homestead transformed into a thriving ranch, to watch Harlow Springs grow from a few buildings into a real town with a library, a hospital, schools, and churches. They buried her beside Owen on the hillside, her stone reading Sarah Harlow, 1858-1940. She taught us to wait for spring. At her funeral, people stood and shared stories spanning 6 decades. Former students talked about her patience and dedication. Friends spoke of her courage and kindness. Her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren told the story of the frozen land bought for pennies, and the 4 souls who waited inside for spring, and how 2 of those souls had found each other and built something that lasted long beyond their own lives. The homestead continued through the generations. Oliver's son passed it to his daughter, who passed it to her son. Each generation added to it, improved it, honored it, but the core remained the same. The house Owen built still stood, expanded and modernized but recognizable. The garden Sarah tended was still planted every spring. The aspens she had loved still surrounded the clearing, their white trunks shining like hope against the darkness. And on the hillside overlooking it all, 2 headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of Owen and Sarah Harlow, the couple who had taken frozen ground bought for pennies and transformed it into a legacy worth more than money could measure. They had found each other in desperation and built a life in hope. They had chosen love when they could have chosen fear. They had planted seeds in frozen ground and believed in spring. Their story became the founding legend of Harlow Springs, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story about survival and determination, about the power of kindness and the importance of community. But most of all, it was a love story, about 2 people who found each other against all odds and built something that lasted not just their lifetimes, but for all the generations that followed. Because sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely beginnings. Sometimes frozen ground is exactly where you need to plant your seeds. And sometimes 4 souls waiting for spring is exactly what you need to find to build a life worth living, a love worth having, and a legacy worth leaving behind. The land that Owen bought for pennies became priceless not because of what was in the ground, but because of what was built upon it. A family, a community, a love that transformed everything it touched. And every spring, when the snow melted and the aspens leafed out and the garden came back to life, the people of Harlow Springs remembered that truth. Spring always comes if you are brave enough to wait for it, strong enough to survive the winter, and wise enough to recognize love when it finds you in the most unexpected places. Owen and Sarah Harlow proved that, and their legacy lived on in every person who chose hope over despair, building over running, love over loneliness. That was their gift to the world, and it was priceless.